Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. With another period number 11 and 12, I'm Ms. Fatima Muhammad Iqbal. Today we are going to end this unit with an episode from the novel Around the World in 80 Days, and today we have the period The Race to New York. If we recall the last episode of this novel, we found that Mr. Passepartout was kidnapped by Red Indians. Now, in this episode, you will find Mr. Fogg following Mr. Passepartout in order to rescue him. He doesn't care about his schedule and he just wants to rescue Mr. Passepartout. Let's watch the videos before reading the lesson.
Commanding officer of the fort said,
"Sir, 3 passengers have disappeared."
"Dead?"
asked the captain.
"Dead or prisoners, it is uncertain. Do you plan to pursue the Indians? The lives of 3 men are in question,"
said Mr. Fogg.
"Can I risk the lives of 50 men to save 3?
The officer asked.
"I don't know whether you can, sir, but you should,"
said Mr. Fogg.
"Nobody here has the right to teach me my duty,"
said the captain.
"Fine,
said Mr. Fogg.
then I will go alone."
Upon hearing this, Fix exclaimed,
"You, sir, all alone in pursuit of the Indians?
"I will not leave these men to die. I will go,"
said Mr. Fogg.
You are a brave man, sir.
Declared the captain.
You will not go alone."
Turning to his soldiers, he asked for 30 volunteers. The whole company stepped forward at once. The captain selected 30 and chose an experienced sergeant to lead them. Mr. Fogg then turned to Fix and said,
"I wish to ask you a favor. Please remain with Aouda until I return. In case anything should happen to me."
Fix's face went pale. Separate himself from the man he had followed so closely for so long? Let Mr. Fogg wander the desert chasing Indians? How could he? Fix looked at Mr. Fogg. The gentleman's gaze was calm and frank. Fix lowered his eyes and said,
"I will stay."
A few moments later, Mr. Fogg pressed Ouda's hand. He handed her his precious carpet bag and went off with the sergeant and his squad to mount their horses. Just before they rode off, Mr. Fogg faced the soldiers and said,
"My friends, I will divide $5,000 among you if we save the prisoners."
It was then a little past noon. Ouda retired to the waiting room, where she sat alone, thinking of the generosity and tranquil courage of Phil. Long whistles were heard approaching from the east. It was the train's runaway engine, which had continued down the rails until the engineer regained consciousness and reversed its course. Most of the passengers were happy to see the engine resume its place at the head of the train. Now they could continue their journey. But Ouda desperately pleaded with the engineer to wait for Mr. Fogg and the other missing passengers.
"You cannot interrupt the trip.
Replied the engineer.
We're already 3 hours behind."
"And when will another train pass here from San Francisco?" she asked.
"Tomorrow evening, madam."
"Well then, I will wait," said Ouda.
"I will remain with her,"
said Mr. Fix.
"I will make sure no harm comes to her while we wait."
The engineer then boarded the train, blew a farewell whistle, and the train slowly moved off across the snowy plain. At 7 o'clock, the captain betrayed his worry and began to rub his hands anxiously. Then, gunshots were heard. Was it a signal? The soldiers who had remained in the fort rushed out. Half a mile to the south, they could see a small group approaching. Mr. Fogg was riding at the head of the squad, and just behind him were Passepartout and the other 2 missing passengers. They had met and fought the Indians 10 miles south of Fort Kearny. Passepartout and his companions had managed to escape their ropes and were already struggling against the Indians when Mr. Fogg and the soldiers arrived. The fight had been quick and successful. They were all welcomed back at the station with a joyful cheer. Phileas Fogg distributed the reward he had promised to the soldiers. Ouda took her protector's hand and pressed it to her own, too moved even to speak. Meanwhile, Passepartout was looking around for the train. He thought he would find it there, ready to start for Omaha. He hoped that they could make up the lost time.
The train!
Cried Passepartout.
Gone.
Said Fix.
And when does the next train pass here?
Asked Mr. Fogg. Not until this evening, explained Oda.
Ah,
Said Mr. Fogg quietly. They were now 20 hours behind schedule. Fix approached Mr. Fogg with a possible solution. While Fix had been sitting in the station, a man had approached him and offered him a ride on a sledge with sails. Fix pointed to the man who was walking up and down in front of the station. Mr. Fogg paused. He had never heard of any vehicle like the one described. He went up to the man after a brief exchange. The two entered a hut a short distance from the fort. Mr. Fogg examined the curious device. A low frame was mounted on two long runners, like skis. A high mast was attached to the frame, held firmly by thin metal wires. Attached to the mast was a wide sail. The owner of the vehicle, a man named Mudge, said the sledge could take them to Omaha, where they could catch a train to Chicago, and finally to New York. Mr. Fogg made a bargain with Mudge. At 8 o'clock the sledge was ready. Mr. Fogg, Aouda, Passepartout, and Fix took their places. The great sail was hoisted, and soon they were skimming across the frozen prairie at 40 miles an hour. The travelers huddled close together to protect themselves from the cold. The freezing wind burned Passepartout's face as red as the setting sun. Aouda was cosily wrapped in fur. Mr. Fogg was as calm and confident as usual, sitting close beside Aouda. Fix was happy to be moving closer to England with Mr. Fogg in his sight. Passepartout knew that he would never forget Mr. Fogg's bravery, nor would he forget the sacrifice that Mr. Fogg had made to rescue him from the Indians. Without hesitation, Fogg had risked his fortune and his life. Mudge steered his strange vehicle skillfully. Traveling on skis, they were able to cross the frozen Platte River and shorten the distance they would have traveled by train. They arrived at the station in Omaha just in time to catch the next train to Chicago. Mr. Fogg generously rewarded Mudge, and they jumped aboard the train as it slowly pulled out of the station.
As you have watched the videos and you realize that Mr. Fogg, without thinking about his tough schedule, he went to rescue Passepartout. Let's read the lesson in detail. The Race to New York, episode number 10. After the fight, Fogg prepared to follow the warriors to the south and rescue Passepartout. And he asked the captain to help. But the captain replied, "I can't leave the fort to save just 3 people. They may already be dead." "Then I'll go alone," Fogg said. "Remember, Passepartout saved all our lives." Hearing this, the captain decided to let 30 of his soldiers go with Fogg. To the men, Fogg said, "I'll give you 5,000 pounds to share if we rescue the prisoners." So in this case, he motivated them. Next, Fogg gave Oda his bag with all the money, and he asked Fix to stay at the station and look after her. Then he said goodbye and left with the soldiers. Oda thought he was the bravest man in the world. A few hours later, the engine returned. The driver was now well enough to go back and get the carrots and then to continue the journey. Soon after that, everyone except for Oda and Fix got on and left. Dark came and snow was falling. Oda sat awake all night, worried about Fogg. So they were waiting anxiously for Mr. Fogg and Passepartout. But then at 7 a.m. next morning, Fogg, Passepartout and all the others arrived safely. Oda was extremely happy. However, the train had gone, and the next would not arrive till that evening, and Fogg was already 20 hours behind schedule. If we can't get to New York by 9 p.m. on 11th December, we will be too late. he said. Passepartout was very upset because he felt that it was all his fault. But then Fix asked Fogg, "Do you really have to be there by then?" "Yes, it's extremely important." "Well, there is a man here who can take us over the snow on a sledge with sails." Here you can see sails. There was no time to lose. They climbed on the open sledge and started the 200-mile journey to Omaha, Nebraska. It was cold and dangerous, and Passepartout had to shoot at wolves that came too near. But it was fast, and they were able to travel at 40 miles per hour. Then, when they arrived in Omaha, there was a train ready to leave for Chicago. Quickly, they all jumped on, and in minutes, they were traveling again. Chicago, the next day, 10th December. They got off and immediately got on another train for New York. They set up again, and it seemed that everything was going well. However, it did not go quite well enough. They finally arrived in New York at 11:15. You remember he said 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. and they arrived there when 11:15. So they were 2 hours and 15 minutes late. On the night of 11th December, and they were too late, the China, it's a ship name, their ship to England had already left. It was a disaster. Fogg and his friends were terribly sad and disappointed. They were also exhausted, so in the end, the travelers decided that they should go to St. Nicholas Hotel on Broadway in order to get some sleep. After all that happened, it now seemed that there was no hope of finishing the journey in 80 days. So here it is a very disappointing end of this episode, where it is the first time that Fogg is behind his schedule because of that terrible incident happened. Mr. Passepartout helped everybody, but the kidnapping part was really a catastrophe. That's why Mr. Fogg is was late for 2 hours, and he missed the train. And now, let's see what happens in the next episode. Let's get to the exercises. Answer the group of questions with one sentence. So many parts here are: when did Fogg go? Where did he go? Who with, and to do what? After the fight, Fogg went south with 30 soldiers to rescue Passepartout. Now read question number 2 and answer it. What was the engine driver well enough to do a few hours later? What did the passengers do? And what did the train do then? Pause the video and write down your answers. So you can check your answers with me. The engine driver was well enough to go back and get the carriage. Then the passengers got on the train, and the train went to New York. Question number 3 and 4. Pause the video, solve them. Where did Oda wait? We know that. We saw it in the video as well. She waited at Fort Kearny Station. Who was with her? Mr. Fix, yes. And what with? What did she have in her hand? Carpet bag. And until when? What time? 7 a.m. next morning. If you wrote next morning without a.m., it's also acceptable. How far did Fogg and the others travel across the snow? On what and how fast? How did they go? They went on a sledge. And what was the speed? 40 miles per hour. They traveled across 200 miles on a sledge at 40 miles per hour. See, after watching the video and reading to the text, you will be able to answer the questions very, very easily. Where did they get to next day? What did they do there, and what were they doing soon after that? When they reached Chicago, they got off the train and got on another train to New York. They must get to the New York at 9, but unfortunately they reached very late. When they got to the New York, what had the ship already done? So how did they feel, and what did they finally decide to do, and why? The ship had already left. Its name was China. They felt bad and disappointed. So they went to St. Nicholas Hotel to take some rest, as they were really exhausted. Last activity from this episode of the novel. Pause the video and write down your answers and then check with me. These are the timelines, and you are going to write Fogg's diary for his events. Though he is very sad, but he notes down everything in his diary. 8 December afternoon, they went to look for Passepartout after he had disappeared in the attack. 9 December 7 a.m. they came back to Fort Kearny Station. It is the name of the railway station. Then they went on a sledge to Omaha, Nebraska at 14 miles per hour, and they covered total distance of 200 miles. On 9 December afternoon, they arrived in Omaha. Then they took a train to Chicago. On 10 December, they arrived in Chicago, and then they took another train to New York. 11 December 9 p.m. This was the scheduled time. This was the proposed time, but the ship left at this time. And unfortunately, they reached on 11 December, 11:15 p.m. They arrived in New York. See, 2 hours and 15 minutes late. So it was the sad ending of this episode. Hopefully you understood. Thank you very much from Ms. Fatima Iqbal. Good luck and stay safe.